Beautiful, beautiful song. Happy Easter once again. The story hasn't changed. In all these years, the story remains the same. It was the end of Passover. Jesus had been brought to trial, crucified, and buried. And early in the morning on the first day after Passover, Mary of Magdala and several other women made their way to the tomb where Jesus had been laid. And when they got there, the tomb was opened. But there was no body in the tomb. Several of the women ran back to where the disciples were resting and reported what they had found. Two of the disciples, Peter and another, came running to the tomb to find Jesus was not there. When they discovered that the tomb was empty, they went back to where they were resting. But Mary of Magdala stayed. She went in the tomb, and she was weeping. "What have they done with my Lord?" And the angels comforted her and said, "Woman, why are you weeping? They have taken my Lord," she said. "What have they done with him?" And the angels assured her not to weep for the dead. And she stepped out of the tomb and saw a man who she thought was a gardener. And she said, "Sir, if you have taken my Lord, please tell me where you have placed him, and I will go to retrieve him." And the man said, "Mary." And with that, Mary of Magdala recognized the voice of Jesus and said, "Rabboni," her teacher. She was moved, but he told her not to touch him, not yet. Mary of Magdala went back to where the disciples were and told them all that she had experienced and that she saw the Lord. So Mary of Magdala is described as the disciple to the disciples, one who was very close to Jesus. We don't often hear about this in the King James Version or the Revised Standard Version, but there are many who believe that Mary was one of Jesus' most devoted disciples. And yet, on that morning, she did not recognize the Spirit of Jesus. "What have you done with my Lord?" she said. I can feel Mary's sadness. I can hear her grief. She can't find her Lord. And I can sense her somewhat relieved when she recognizes him. But she can't go near to him. And now on that very same day, later in the day, the disciples had gathered in a locked room because they feared the leaders. They feared the priests, those who had crucified Jesus. They feared for their lives. What would happen to them now that Jesus was gone? And as they sat eating and probably feeling pretty somber, Jesus' spirit entered the room and said, "Peace be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his wounds. He showed them his side and his hands, and the disciples were overjoyed by the presence of Jesus. Now, these disciples were startled at first, perhaps even fearful that this presence was with them, claiming to be Jesus. But with peace be with you." And seeing his wounds, they believed. Even after their years together, the disciples did not immediately recognize that spirit of Jesus. And how these two stories, Mary of Magdala and the disciples not recognizing that presence of Jesus, that Lord, which when we speak of the Lord metaphysically, remember what it means. It's the highest consciousness that we can attain. It's our I am spirit calling us forward, our identity, our true identity. How often do we shudder and fear at the thought, not having that clear guidance, not having that teacher to tell us how to be, where to be, what to do? How in our own life do we sometimes not recognize that pure, perfect guidance, our own I am, the Lord of our own being? And then there's Thomas. Now, Thomas wasn't present with the disciples the evening of Jesus' resurrection. He was doing other things. So that when he returned, the disciples all told him about having seen Jesus, and he made his presence known. Oh, but Thomas wasn't having any of it. He said, "Nope, not until I see the wounds of his hands and his side will I believe that it is my Lord. Not until I put my fingers on his wounds." And a week later, the disciples had gathered for another meal when Jesus made his presence known. And again he said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, "Place your hand on my side. Place your hands on my hands and touch my wounds." And when Thomas did, he said, "My Lord, my God." And Jesus replied to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who do not see me, but still believe." Thomas, who was a devoted follower as well as the other disciples, as well as Mary of Magdala, needed palpable, touchable, tangible proof. And what doubts do we hold in our life about this idea of Jesus as our way shower? What doubts do we hold in our heart? What proof do we need? What do we need to hear to believe that we are loved? That just as we are, this very day we are loved. Yes, we are always drawn forward to express more of that divinity of ourselves, to rise and be better, to do better in things, but yet at this very moment, we are loved by our God, just as we are. How much proof do we need to know that we are made of love, to love? How much proof do we need to remember that we are divine, that we are first and foremost, before we are anything, we are spiritual beings, blessed and gifted time in this earth as human. But first, we are spiritual beings. And how many times do we need to hear it, to say it, to believe it? Then we move to the Gospel of Luke and the road to Emmaus. On the day that Jesus was in the tomb, 2 of the disciples were making their way to Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking about all the activities, about, what had happened to Jesus, how he was unfairly, unjustly tried, and the presence of Jesus joined them on their walk. And Jesus said to the 2 men, "What is it that you speak of as you walk to Emmaus?" And they were confounded, but they continued with their heads down, walking towards Emmaus, and said, "Have you not heard? Are you the only person that's been in Jerusalem and haven't heard what they've done to Jesus? our kind and righteous teacher. They have crucified him, and he is now buried. And Jesus replied to them, he was the prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all people. Was this not in fulfillment of the prophecy? And as they approached the village, as they approached the Emmaus, the two realized that Jesus was walking on. They still didn't recognize him as Jesus. And they invited him to stay with them because it was nearly dark. And finally, Jesus said yes, he would stay with them. They gathered again to partake in a dinner meal. And Jesus said, blessing over the bread, and served them the bread. And as Jesus broke the bread, the disciples recognized him as Jesus of Nazareth by the breaking of the bread. And they rushed and made their way back to Jerusalem to tell all of the disciples what they had heard and seen in Jesus. So when our resistance is softened, when we surrender to the truth of our being, when we recognize, as Mary of Magdala and the disciples finally did, the Lord of our being, when we claim the I am of our divinity, when we no longer doubt our Lord, our I am, the highest consciousness that we can attain, then we are able and ready to go into the world and fulfill that last commandment, to love one another. Not only those who are easy to love, but those who challenge us to love. Not only those who look like us, but those with every shade of beautiful of skin. Every size, every shape, every gender. Not only those who pray like us, but those who pray differently. Not only those who think like us, but those who take on a different perspective. Not only those who vote like us, but those who vote differently than us. And not only those who believe like us, but those who are courageous to take their own path. That's the love we're able to share. So today, on this Easter Sunday, this celebration of the resurrection, life anew, we are invited to rise to a higher consciousness, to a higher way of being. The choice is always ours. So are you willing to rise today?
Yes.
So are you willing to rise today?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The question remains then, how shall we rise today? How shall we rise?
Today I rise as the power of zeal. Zeal is the excitement and enthusiasm that carries me through all the activities of my life, all that is mine to do.
Today I rise as the power of understanding. With spiritual understanding, I know how to accomplish and achieve. I know with my heart and see clearly.
Today I rise as the power of order. Divine order is my ability to bring life into manifestation in proper order of mind, idea, and expression.
Today I rise as the power of wisdom. Through the Christ in me, I grow in wisdom and judgment. I depend on the ability of wisdom to guide me into right action.
Today I rise in the power of life with vitality and wholeness, creativity. I bring into life expression of the pure, external God within me.
Today I rise as the power of imagination. Through imagination, I see creation as God sees creation, perfect. I use my imagination to bring ideas to life with shape, depth, and texture.
Today I rise as the power of faith. Faith is the assurance that spiritual laws are always at work, and unchangeable divine truth is working consistently for all of life.
Today I rise as the power of will. Through my ability of will, I move forward in right action. My will propels all of the abilities forward.
Today I rise as the power of strength. I am strong in the Lord. I keep my mind focused on divine ideas, and I am patient, tolerant, centered, and balanced. God is my strength.
Today I rise as the power of power. My ability of power allows me to change my thoughts, words, and actions to create a consciousness of the Christ in me.
Today I rise as the power of love. I am love, and I realize my oneness with all creation. With love, I am attracting and harmonizing and unifying life.
Today, I rise as the power of elimination. Through the gift of God of elimination, I can remove any obstacle that stands in my way with God's help. Any bad habits, any negative thinking, and even help progress myself forward with God's help through elimination to be my true, real, godly self.
These are the 12 powers that unity teaches. And one of Jesus' disciples is represented by each of the powers. So we can choose to rise. We can call up these powers. They are innate in all of us. We can call them up and use them to live our highest and best self. So today is an invitation to rise to something that we have never been in the past, to courageously step into something new, something greater, for ourself, of ourself. So however we choose to rise today, we call on 1 Corinthians 14 when we say to let all you do be done in love. Namaste and happy day Easter. Happy day of rising for all.